I think we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry about the little technical difficulty there. And I'm glad to see that we've got a big group of people. If we do get some more people to come in, and then we've got an overflow room over in GEB 233, so it looks like we're good for right now. I'm Vince Miller, and I'm the director of the Educational Technology Center, and I appreciate y'all coming in today. I'm here with three people on the panel. We've got Tracy Newman, who's an analyst in the Ed Tech Center, and Patrick Lafferty, who's a professor in interactive media, and we've got Steve Gerson, who's a professor in the English department. And what we thought was there was a program last year on the PBS Digital Nation that was, some of you may have been involved in that. We watched some videos, there were some discussions around that. And there was a show that came out recently called Digital Media, and it's kind of focused a little bit on the K through 12 population. And I think to help us understand a little bit more about what that population is like as they come to us here at college, we thought this would be interesting just to watch a snippet of that and then to have a little bit of a discussion. And we're going to kind of just open it up and do a free flow with the panel, and you're certainly welcome, and we encourage you to ask questions and participate in that. So what I'd like to do is just show probably about 15 minutes of that video, and then we'll open it up. So anyway, one of the things that we're trying out is to have these tech brown bags actually be available through an Adobe web conference tool, so that if people want to sit at their desk and eat lunch there, they can also watch what we're doing in the room, either via the webcam, which would show what's on the camera, people, or just showing the screen if we're doing something on the screen. And hopefully you saw some of that chat stream earlier going back and forth. That would be the way people could participate if they sent in a question, and somebody would be kind of watching that. But we're still testing that, so that's just sort of something going on in the background there today. But hopefully we'll be able to send that out as a public link that anybody could participate. But for now, so we saw the first 15 minutes of that video, and I hope you enjoyed that. I don't know, had anybody already seen that program or heard about that? Okay. I thought it was interesting. I'm going to go ahead and just open it up to the panel a little bit and get your thoughts, and then there's a discussion kind of study guide out on the PBS site too, so we might pull up some of those questions later as well. But let you guys kind of kick it off there.
About this specific program?
If you like.
Or the whole topic of media.
Generally, yeah, thoughts, if you like.
Well, yeah, the program's cool. Vincent sent this as a link to us, and I've looked at it before. It's a pretty neat program. It'd be a good idea if y'all can see it. The topic in general, this digital media education, I find technology to be fascinating. It's just a lot of fun. It's very interesting to me. But I was noticing I'm the oldest member on the panel here, and therefore the most mature, and I have a moderated view about the whole thing. It's not like, wow, what a fantastic idea. Let's just dump everything we've ever done and just go this way. Well, that's not going to happen. My theory is very simply that if there was one way to teach, we'd be doing it. There isn't one way to teach because we're all different and students are all different. So I think digital media is a wonderful add-on, but in no way am I going to use it ever to replace everything else. My little quick take.
And you might be surprised to hear the professor of interactive media saying that as well, but I agree with that. I don't think that technology is the end-all be-all for teaching. It is a wonderful tool, but just like a hammer, it can be used to kill and it can be used to build a house. So the idea is to use it to build houses, right? And so we want to focus our energy on technology that is going to push education forward and help our students grasp the information, be it English or interactive media or whatever you happen to be teaching, math or science. Help them get that information and digest it in a way that they can work with it.
Yeah, I think it's important to start with the goals, the standards or whatever your curriculum, what you're supposed to be teaching, and then start from scratch. Take these concepts that you are needing to teach and figure out how best to teach them. And it might involve technology, it might not involve technology. I know there was a program a couple years ago, and it was talking about kids who were upset that they went to a very technology-based high school. They go to college, and they would ask their professor, instead of writing a paper, can I turn in a movie? And they'd be like, no, And, you know, there is a place for a movie, and a movie's fun, and a movie teaches you a lot. You have to storyboard, you have to plan, you have to script. They're all valid skills, but you still need to be able to write a paper. You have to be able to organize your thoughts, use the English language, you know, grammar, spelling, all that stuff is still important despite, you know, so you have to work it all in. I'm not a classroom teacher, but I am a mom. I was very involved in my kids' education. And I don't know what they have now because I've seen a lot of those games disappear out of the stores, but, you know, 10, 15 years ago when my kids were little, they had all the learning games, Math Blaster, Reading Blaster, you know, all sorts of clue finders, problem solving kind of stuff. I swear my kids learned more from those games than they did in school for like the first half of elementary school. And they didn't know they were learning. I didn't make them play. You know, they played for fun. That was what they did. And, you know, school can be fun, and it should be fun, you know, especially for the little ones, to get them engaged, get them, you know, loving to learn. And then the other thing that I think is that they mentioned there is about, you know, having facts that you don't know what to do with. Critical thinking. You know, we need to be teaching people how to think, how to problem solve, how to continue learning, because whatever you learn in school today, in 10, 20 years, you know, the pace we're going, jobs are going to be completely different. I think we say that now, we're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And how do we do that?
And I have a question, so sort of tagging on to what you said about the technology could be used poorly as well as in a good way. Can you think of an instance when you've seen somebody teach with technology in a poor way where it really didn't further the content or the goal of the class?
I really find PowerPoint to be worthless. I try to use it periodically because I think I should, number one. Number two, because my handwriting is horrible, and I think it's easier for students to read. And then what I find is that when I work a PowerPoint presentation into a class, it becomes so stiff, so stale, so dull, so rigid, that I lose all spontaneity, and I lose all ability to interact with students. And that's just my personal situation. It doesn't work for me. And so I now put my PowerPoint slides on Angel and never look at them, and say, there they are for you if you want to look at it at home. But it has been deleterious to my, I'm an English professor. It has deteriorated, my teaching has been deleterious to my, so there's an example.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misuse of PowerPoint out there. PowerPoint's meant to be a visual aid. You know, you need to discuss a graph, you put the graph up there, you know, not what you're reading, or, you know, it's just supposed to be a visual, a way to show something that you are then talking about, you know, a painting that you're going to critique, or, you know, something.
But going along with this is that I felt compelled to do it because it seemed like, I should, but I learned my lesson. I don't do it anymore.
One of the latest things that I actually heard on the PowerPoint in terms of advice about a presentation is no text.
Yeah,
It should
I've
be
heard that
all
also.
graphics or
I've heard
images,
that
and then,
also.
you know, that's kind of your prompt. It's kind of what you're saying, Tracy.
Let's
And
hear
you
from
speak. Yeah,
one of our guests.
I find that nowadays PowerPoint, okay, that's already, you know, last decade.
Yeah.
This decade, the same vices can be said about Facebook and Twitter. I don't know how many times I've seen, you know, my butcher asking me to become his friend on Facebook. Am I going to do that? No. Am I going to be, you know, the friend of KCI Airport? No. I mean, there are some things that make sense, and it makes sense to use those tools in some instances, but in other, you know, areas it really doesn't make any sense, and it can even, you know, impede teaching and learning.
Patrick and I'll get off this in a second. Patrick and I were talking right before this all began. And so right now I teach technical writing. Right now in my class, we're doing resumes. And so they can do resumes, which are resumes on YouTube, video resumes, and they could do Second Life virtual reality resumes, and they could do LinkedIn resumes, but I'm not going to do it. It would serve, if I taught an entire class on job preparation, I would have them do those various things. But in a class where I'm teaching multiple things, and resume is a small part of it, I'm going to have them create a hard copy resume that they can send out as a Word doc. It would be something of a waste of their time and mine to have them do something that might have limited value, like a resume or a virtual reality kind of resume. I'm sorry.
Going off two of these points that have come up, I require my students to have Twitter accounts for my class, all of my students, all of my classes, and we carry the classroom outside of the physical space into Twitter. So for that purpose, I disagree with what you're saying, but I do see your point that yes, maybe you don't want to be Facebook friends with your butcher or KCI Airport. I personally follow a KCI Twitter account because they tweet excellent airfare deals, right? So there is a benefit for me, and Twitter is a very different environment than Facebook. I'm very anti-Facebook. I'll put that on the table right now. We don't need to get into that now necessarily, but just stating my bias there. Secondly, bad use of technology. I think Second Life is a terrible use of technology, personally. I think that the barriers to entry to get to a point where you can adequately communicate in Second Life are so vast that it is virtually useless, to pardon the pun. But, you know, it is, yeah, it's more of a problem, and the buy-in, it was a Herculean marketing effort on the part of Second Life, I believe, to get academic communities and businesses alike, which if you watch the original Digital Nation, there's a whole segment on IBM's use of Second Life. And I actually just watched it again last night. My brother is an interaction designer, my sister is a psychology major, and we watched it together and then talked about it after that. And I can tell you our experiences and our reactions to it were very different, but the consensus was, why would you ever use Second Life?
Yeah, I could see, like, for simulations, things like that. Our whole family's World of Warcraft players. I'll confess, yes, I play World of Warcraft.
There's no shame in that.
You get into Second Life, and you're like, why is this hard? You know, I mean, you get into gaming because it's supposed to be fun. Because if it's not fun, it's not easy, it's not intuitive. Nobody's going to buy it, nobody's going to play it. So I think they made that point on the video as well. That's, I mean, something that learning can take from gaming is that it needs to be relevant, it needs to be fun, it needs to be, you know, useful, or you're going to lose your audience. And you know, you walk into World of Warcraft and without knowing anything, it gets you started, it leads you through tutorials without you knowing you're going through a tutorial, and it is hideously addictive. So, you know, you get sucked into it. You go into Second Life and you go through their little tutorial and you know, fall on your face a whole bunch of times, and then the tutorial's done and then you're standing there.
I created
what do I do
created
next?
an avatar in Second Life, and I was horrible. It's a difficult. You use Herculean barriers. In my avatar, I was trying to have it fly somewhere, and I buried myself underground, and I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And so I was buried alive virtually.
Yeah. Well, I've attended conferences where they talk about using it for classes. I mean, I understand simulations, things like that, but if you have a whole bunch of avatars sitting around watching a PowerPoint or a video on a fake
What a waste of
screen,
time.
you know, and some people say, wow, that was really engaging because I felt like everyone was there. I'm like, but you're looking at their little avatars. You're not looking at the person. You don't have body language. You don't have any of the face-to-face stuff. You could just project a PowerPoint way bigger on a, you know, Adobe Connect, something like that. It seems like a waste of time to me, and I'm wondering if it's more of a stepping stool between people who are used to the face-to-face and you know, between that and not being able to see somebody because you're just watching, you know, hearing the audio and maybe seeing slides on the screen. They need to see the little pretend humans, you know, I'm not sure, but yeah, it seems like you know, you need to get there an hour in advance to make sure everybody can get their avatar and get to the right place and, you know, spend 20, you know, you have people answering questions. I can't get there. I'm buried alive. What do I do? So, yeah.
Two topics that dovetail off of this. One, you had asked us questions beforehand about what would be the challenges that we might experience in incorporating technology in the classroom. And one is this Herculean barriers that, and it's not even as simple as having the wrong cables. Or in this instance, having no sound.
Right.
Or in this instance, having a show stop in the middle. It's the barriers that exist. One time I was trying to start something in class, and I realized that in order to teach my students how to do what I wanted them to do, it would take the entire class. And I don't mean the entire class, I mean the entire semester. And so I would lose everything I was trying to do just to teach them something that maybe had minimal value. So there's one issue. Now back to this young man over here with Facebook and so forth. We had an instance, I think in the English department, where students were using Angel for emailing, and we had an instance where some student was getting stalked by another student. And it's not the same as your butcher stalking you, though that might have been the case. But there's this little element that might be frightening. Something to think about.
Do we have students here?
Yeah.
What, just one of you, would you like to, you know, from maybe a different perspective as a student rather than an instructor?
One thing I always consider is how do you incorporate so much use of technology, especially like in school and the classroom, for people who want to learn but then have no technology at home.
Well,
I mean, especially like you said, you require your students to use Twitter.
And that's why I use Twitter and not Facebook, because Facebook you can't use on a simple mobile phone.
But how can we-
quote-unquote dumb phone, right?
I mean, some people don't even have cell phones.
And now, if you don't have a cell phone, that's problematic. But also, if you end up in my classroom, you should be strongly considering buying a computer because you're an interactive media student. So we do provide systems, and they have great access here on campus. But you know, there is the impetus to
That's what I'm
dive
getting
in.
at is from some teachers.
Right.
Kind of, I guess the vibes that you get is that you say, tough luck, go buy it or drop the
Right,
class
right.
and eat the money.
Right.
And I think we've had discussions about that before, that
Yeah.
hopefully it's moving in the direction where financial aid will purchase you an e-reader or a computer, or, you know, you can use it for some of these devices. Because until then, most, disciplines can't require it, you know, interactive media is different because
Right.
that's your, you know, you're using.
You
a
really
computer.
should have a computer.
Right,
You're gonna
but,
be-
you know,
class
you're an
demand.
English
Yeah.
major, a
Like a
history
philosophy
major,
class,
you
you know.
can't require, yeah.
And then-
that's a
That's-
really good point.
It is, yeah.
Because we think Johnson County, we're all incredibly wealthy. You know, you're very wealthy. So we have all this massive technology. Well, you know, the digital divide, in this instance, this show, the digital divide was those who believe in it and those who don't. But that digital divide is those who have it and those who don't have it. And it's a very valid point. I teach in a computer classroom. I'm teaching online. I'm teaching an online class. And all of my students obviously have to have computers, and yet they don't. Or they'll have a computer and it breaks down, or they spill a Coke on it, and then they can't get another one because they don't have the ready cash. So those very simple, small, but massive barriers.
Well, and the other mistake is thinking that every person, you know, 18 just out of high school coming into college, oh, they're all whizzes at computers. They're not. You know, not everyone had a computer growing up. They didn't have access. They, you know, or just didn't have the cause to use it. But I'd like to see in K through 12 is, instead of, you know, moving away from the computer class, we're going to computer class now, and we're going to learn how to use Excel, and we're going to learn how to use Word. It needs to be just integrated into the curriculum, so it's just something you do. You know, this assignment, you need to turn in, you know, a Word document. You need to turn in a PowerPoint. You need to, you know, do this math problem in Excel, or, you know, something, and just integrate it in rather than it being this separate
I think
thing.
Olathe is the only district that's really doing a good job with this, and Olathe and Northwest specifically. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, another face to the digital divide would be those who are comfortable with it and those
Okay.
who aren't.
Right.
And I teach all face-to-face classes, but I use Angel extensively, and, you know, I hate to make them go through the tutorial for Angel because I'm not an online instructor, but yet I've got students that I know they're not going out and getting the material that I want them to get. Any thought about, and they're not necessarily all of what we would call, you know, the older students.
Right, no, and it doesn't fall on age lines. There
Yeah,
are, you know,
age has
you could be
nothing to do with it.
60 and be a computer whiz, and you can be 18 and not know the first thing. The other thing too about some of the younger generation coming up is that they might know how to manipulate the technology, but they don't know how to really use it. You know, I can answer, you know, I can send a text message, I can answer my phone, I can play games on my phone, but you need to search and find information. You know, they don't necessarily know how to properly use search terms, or, you know, how to use the technology for a goal rather than just manipulating it.
We didn't answer your question.
No.
You know, your question is how do we help them, so, Vince?
Oh, right.
Require
Yeah, you know,
orientation.
I
That's a great
teach,
question.
all of my stuff is in Angel, and 95% of my students have no trouble getting into it, and 5% do. And often I can go into I'm in a computer classroom, that might make an enormous difference, right? Are you in a computer classroom?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I can go around to them and help them individually while others are doing something else. Do I always want to do that? I don't think so, but I have to. And then, of course, you have the other student who I can show him how to do something in Angel 12 times, and he still doesn't get it, all right?
It sounds like also maybe part of the problem might be that you don't do a lot in Angel yourself. Is that possible?
No, I mean, everything I do in the class goes out onto Angel, and then I also put extra things out on Angel. But I do teach a face-to-face class, you know, so, I mean, a student that comes into a face-to-face class, I don't think that they should know how to use Angel.
We had a
But-
whole discussion about that, or whether or not you could even, we had, you know, some, people advocating that if you teach a face-to-face class, you can't require them to take a test on Angel or to get
I don't
material on
even go
Angel.
that far.
And I believe it's been rewritten, right? And if you look in the open-close class list and you mouse over a face-to-face class, the description says, you know, this meets in a classroom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to be able to use technology, because that's part of the college's mission statement, is to prepare people and be able to use
You're
technology,
assuming they're gonna mouse
et cetera.
over, you know.
If you don't wanna require the orientation for everybody, you could have some sort of a little pretest that they, you know, first thing they do when they come in the class, and if they don't pass it, then they have to go take the orientation or, you know, something, so at least then you don't feel like you're wasting the time of students who don't need it. On the other hand, once they've taken it once for one class, they're flagged forever for the rest of their career here, so, you know, it takes about 45 minutes to go through, especially if you know what you're doing. It's out
What
of the way.
percentage are we talking about in your class? Is it 1 student or 12
A
students?
third.
Oh, okay.
I teach very mixed age, mixed
What's your class?
background, over
Just
in
curious.
like civil engineering technology.
Civil engineering.
I've got people that haven't been in school for 35
Now, civil
years.
engineering technology, they're gonna have to use computers in their job, right?
Well, in the construction management area, yeah, it's a challenge.
So then you feel like, and I know this term that I'm about to use has become a bit anathema around here, but a prerequisite might be in order? I mean, do you feel that a basic computing course?
We go round and round and round on that. It's more the, I mean, I think Angel's very easy to use, and most people
I
do too.
do too, yes.
But if you've never even heard of an online learning environment, it's pretty foreign.
If you don't have the paradigm, yeah.
It's like, what is this?
Yeah, Patrick?
Yeah, I think this is not a new problem, by the way. I think if we think like 20 years back, we had other problems. We had people that were not able to use, you know, the library's catalogs. They were not able to find an article. Now, maybe we can go back and see, okay, what did we do back then to solve this problem? And I remember that when I first got into college, we were put together in teams, and we could learn from each other. You know, we had a list of 20 references that we had to find in those, you know, horribly old, dusty, and I
Those
make it
little
like,
paper cards.
you know, a lot of years ago, but, you know, approaches like that might work for the new, old problems as well.
And maybe you've tried this, oh, sorry, Judy, maybe you've tried this already, but have you walked the students as a class through the orientation that?
Well, but that's not what I'm teaching. I've got
Right.
enough
No, I'm
content.
agreeing with you.
You know what I
That's
mean?
taking
It's
valuable
like-
time out of your class.
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly,
you have to be
and-
this tall to ride the ride, and that's, you know, that's the mentality,
Yeah,
right? Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a balance.
Well, and do we have something on site, a place that, well, we have a writing center, we have a math center. Is there a place that some of your students could go to, is there a place to go get help?
Not really, just a help desk. but
No,
that's-
we've asked for that, but it hasn't occurred.
Okay. Alan had something to say.
Well, my question is even when I look at the screen behind you, I see a plethora of tools, and that doesn't mention all of those. Some people don't like the tools, some people like it. Excel's there if you want to do graphs, things and that. And I think the challenge is, how do you address this challenge of, we've got a toolbox that's got so many doggone tools in it. Some like this tool, and yet the faculty have, you know, a limited amount of time outside the classroom to dig into that. So how do we address that? What tools to use? Because, I mean, Turning Point, that was a big thing for a while, you know, Camtasia, Relay, Camtasia.
I think that's a huge problem, is that there's so many tools and so many of them do similar things, but this one has this and this one has this, and, you know, and if you could just smash them all together. Jonathan and I used to talk about that. If they, you know, you take all the different, I don't know, all the tools that do similar things out there and smash them into one tool that had all the features, unfortunately you add all the features and then it becomes hard to use. I think who ends up bearing the burden is the students, because you have one, you know, instructor who likes these tools and another instructor who likes these tools and another one who likes these tools, and guess who has to learn them all? Because you're taking those three classes.
That's education though.
Right.
It's really not your responsibility. It's really the student's responsibility to
Yeah.
figure it out. And I feel this all the time, students go from class to class to class to class, from discipline to discipline to discipline. It's their responsibility to adapt to us. And I mean that with all seriousness.
Right.
And I think that's part of education. I'm not gonna adapt to my 300 different students. It's easier for them to adapt to their 10 different teachers. And I think that's a student's responsibility.
Well, and that is true, that distance learning orientation, whether you require it, I mean, if you don't require it, it's free, it's open to everyone. So you would hope that a student who is struggling and can't access the content and doesn't understand how to use it would, it's like you should make it known, maybe have a link to it in your class that says, if you're having trouble enrolling in this distance learning orientation, even though it's a face-to-face class, and learn how to use Angel. And the nice thing about that is that it's divided into different topics. So maybe they don't need to know about how to take a test, or they don't need to know, but they need to know how to access it, how to pull down a handout, or whatever's up there, how to participate in a discussion. So they can pick and choose and teach themselves the parts they need.
I might offer too, we do have Ed Lovett as the director of distance learning, and he offers those orientations for students at the beginning of the semester, but it might be worth just asking if you do kind of a custom one where you could offer to your students that, at this time, he's gonna be there and do an orientation, you can avail yourself.
But I think Tracy just made your point by saying, put a link in your class. Well, if they can't even get into your class
Right.
on Angel, how do they get to the link to get the information? And this is a problem we see with all of these different variations of technology, is that we have to decide, are we creating barriers to learning, or are we making tools that help people learn? And that's why I try very hard to not use proprietary, no offense ed tech people, but ed tech technology in my classes. I do as much as I can through WordPress, which is an open source blogging platform. And it's open, and it's open to the world. So people outside of my class can actually also access the education. They just aren't gonna get the certification, right? So it's a communal learning environment, but all you have to do is be able to use a web browser to get to the content. So if you need a handout, it's gonna be there. If you need to get the syllabus, it's gonna be there. You need to find a way to contact me, there. So you remember the one address that you can put on a piece of paper and carry in your pocket if you have to. If you are, tending towards Luddism, then that's okay. We can get you there. It's just we don't want to create these barriers, because the point is to communicate our knowledge to you. And to your point about, I agree that as an individual instructor, it's not our responsibility to necessarily adapt, but systemically, we need to, as the college or as the community or society at large, whatever, we need to figure out the best way to be improving our systems so that more people can be included in them. So we can't disregard the fact that we do have 300 disparate voices that need to be addressed. On a day in, day out, me coming to work and doing my job basis, I can't necessarily adapt 300 times a day, but, we need to be thinking about that big picture.
Alan, I think to what you were talking about the toolbox being too big, I think one thing that you can think about is, do you need any of those tools? Is there a gap in your classroom that, gosh, students never get this one concept, I wish I had some other way to reach them, or I wish we had some way to practice this certain skill more. I might need a piece of technology, and that's when we hope you come to us at the Ed Tech Center and ask us what would fill this gap. It's so much better than people who come and say, I want to learn to use this tool because I think I need it. And maybe once you find that you've taught them to use that tool, they start using it and they're, it's not really what I needed, I really needed, because it doesn't do this. And you're like, oh, well, I have a different tool. So I think if you, rather than looking at tools and deciding what you're going to use, if you think of it more in reverse of where are the gaps, what do you need to fill, and then find out which tools you can use to fill that gap. Sometimes you don't even know a tool exists, and that's hopefully where we come in, that we can do the research for you, because you can't possibly stay up on all these, we can't even do it, on all these millions of different variations of 27 different things.
But one can argue at the same time is that if you find multiple ways to use the same tool, a hammer can,
Right.
Knock holes in heads, but also can tear down walls. It can be used as a screwdriver if you got the right kind of hammer. All of those things, would it be better? Because PowerPoint in its native sense is kind of blah, but you can integrate graphs and animations and changes if you understand that. So the question comes, there may be a fancy tool, but it may be easier just to stay with the tool and concentrate on the hammer and maximize that benefit of that particular tool. So, that's, I think, you can buy a tool that's got all kinds of connections, Swiss Army knife, okay? But you're probably not gonna use most of them because you don't understand how to use them. And so that, I wonder sometimes, because maybe PowerPoint in its native sense isn't very good anymore. But I tell you what, it was a big deal at one time.
Yeah,
We
well,
go
I
back
think it's
to,
how you use it, not just what tool it is,
Right.
it's how you're using it.
Right.
Got a couple more, so Judy and then Patrick.
A reference in the video to teamwork, and I'm wondering how the students feel. Is technology increasing, creating a welcoming environment to teamwork? In my years in school, teamwork and group work were not appreciated. And yet we're told so often that students have to have this skills in this. Do you feel, like, what is your attitude toward group work or teamwork?
Are you asking the students?
Well,
Or are you asking all of us?
yes, but I was thinking first the students, but what's your overall attitude when you're told you're gonna work together on something?
Students
Or are you
not.
never told to work together on something? Uh-oh, maybe that's the answer right there. I know my kids, they're 17, 18, so the ones at KU, the other ones junior in high school, they still hate group work because it's just so, one person ends up doing all the work and everybody else who doesn't care just goes along for the ride. I think it's getting better, and I think there's potential that with these tools that you can, communicate. You don't have to be able to meet in one place physically. You can do a project together, at weird times or when you don't have transportation or, but they have to be used properly, and you have to know that they're there and you have to be able to use them. And I think we still have such a barrier of students who don't know how to do those things. They don't know how to use the tools, that it's not there yet, but I think it will get easier. I don't know. What do you guys
As the youngest member of this panel, I most recently had to deal with this in classes, right? And I'll tell you, I hated group work too. Anytime a professor or a teacher said, all right, now break off into small groups and get this done, groans around the room, because it is often very poorly implemented, okay? So the skill that we're trying to teach with that is learning how to work with other people and to build a community, right? My classes, I have both ends of the spectrum. The majority of my classes have nothing to do with group work. They are individual projects and you go about your life, right? But I also teach a class that is a group project. The entire class is one group project. We have an external client and we build a website and a whole brand identity for them as well. So that is all group work. But where they both meet is how I use Twitter actually in the class, because we use I don't want to get into a whole Twitter lecture here, but there's a concept called hashtags, which is a way to organize your tweets. And we have one for the class. And so everyone is supposed to be out looking at the world, sharing their experiences through that hashtag. And in doing so, they get to know each other, they build on each other's personality, they then have conversations on Twitter, and because we're all following each other as a class, get to participate in that as well. So we have this entire communal experience that exists in that sphere that transfers into the classroom as well, and transfers throughout the various classes that the students take in our discipline. So we built that community, we've achieved the effect that group work is supposed to be, achieving, but we haven't done it in a specific break off into a group of 3 and tell me the answer to this problem kind of way. So there are different ways of doing it, and I think it's working okay. I don't have any numbers to give you to tell you that that's the truth, but the reaction has been, initially, their students are reticent, oh, another social network, or oh, you're making me join this, oh, I don't want to talk to my butcher, that kind of thing. And then eventually, I've actually had some students who have gone on and are now using it professionally. I've had students take the concepts that they learned in class and apply it to their workplace, where one of my students was a waitress, and a big problem they face in the waitressing world is getting people to cover your shifts. And so she went through and signed up a Twitter account for everyone at her workplace, and they all now follow each other on Twitter, and you send one message, it goes to everyone you work with, and if someone can cover your shift, they reply back. So they're taking these skills and applying them in the real world. And so it's how you implement things, right? Much like PowerPoint. Most times, PowerPoint was, and no offense to anyone in this room, the lazy way out. You throw a bunch of text up on the wall, expect students to read along or fall asleep as you click through, and you read along and fall asleep as you click through. That's the way it was when I was in college, and it was dreadfully boring. Now, there are better tools out there now that lead to more interactivity, like Prezi, which is what I use when I'm doing slide presentations. But PowerPoint itself, not the problem, it's how it was used, because you can do excellent, very creative and interactive creations in PowerPoint. They're beyond a presentation. It is a creation. It is worthy of an experience. So, I know, I'll stop my rant there.
That's good. Only if somebody has to leave, I want to go ahead and give you this opportunity. I know we're getting close to the time, but Patrick, you had another follow-up? Did you want to?
One follow-up to this and then another point. I think the key to group work is to have the right team together. Because I know that I used to get incredibly frustrated when, you know, you had a bunch of people there that were just in for, you know, I don't know what. And you ended up doing all the work. But I just recently read a paper that suggested that, you know, if you put one high achiever with a bunch of low achievers into one group, everybody will profit, because the high achiever has to explain the content to the group, and the low achievers eventually learn something out of it. The second point is about tools, and you know how we have so many different tools. I mean, I think the trend is always going to be towards more tools, and what we really need to teach the students is how to use tools in general, because there are universal truths in those tools. I mean, I don't know. Control C works in almost every application, almost every well-designed application. So
that's a critical phrase.
Yeah. So I think that's the key.
I think the thing too with with the group work is that the eternal difficulty with that is that no one has ever taught how to do a group project. Okay, go do a group project, you know, and you're like, okay, and they're trying to negotiate the, you know, working with each other and how to split up the work, and you know, same kind of thing with peer review. And I had this discussion with an English professor that talked about, you know, students aren't taught how to do a peer review, and that's why so often it's useless. You know, they have dumb comments. My kids complain about it all the time. Yeah, 3 kids peer reviewed my essay, and I didn't get anything useful out of it, and I didn't get any comments to, you know, to revise my paper, and then I turned it in, and now I got a bad grade because I didn't do all these things. Why didn't anybody tell me, you know, I didn't get any of these comments? And the answer was that you need to teach, and maybe Jim, you can talk to that. You need to teach, how do you peer review? What are you reading for? What kind of comments are useful?
Maybe I would say to counter-argue that the whole purpose of, if you're going by what they say in the video, you shouldn't give instruction.
Right.
Because part of it would be problem solving. You know, that you throw students in and then let them
they need to have some sort of guidance or framework though within the, I mean, you can't.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that.
It's like throwing them in the water and learn how to swim.
Part of the problem that students have, and you know, when we complaining about it, is that they're complaining about work to a certain extent, and part of succeeding in work is problem solving. And sometimes I think there's that inability or unwillingness to do that problem solving part of group work or something like that, and that's the barrier you're never going to overcome, you know, no matter how much framework you take.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Thanks, you guys. That was a great panel discussion, and everybody else who participated, so I appreciate you coming out today.